And now for an amazing story. Inspired by the book of Matthew. Chapter 6. Verses 1 to 4.
Ronald lived in a neighborhood of neat, well-kept homes. Every yard was perfectly raked. Each front door was freshly painted. Even the pets were all well-groomed and well-behaved. It was a model neighborhood. Except, of course, for Mrs. Magruder's home right across the street from Ronald. Her bushes were mangy, her gutters were stuffed with dead leaves, and her front door was constantly peeling. Ronald's neighbor Dirk complained about her every time they met for their evening walks.
Her place is an eyesore. Just terrible.
Well, maybe her arthritis is too bad for her to take care of things herself.
Oh, well, she should pay someone. It's ruining the whole block.
Maybe, I don't know, someone should help her?
Dirk frowned for a moment. Then he flashed his pearly white teeth in a big grin.
That's it. She didn't mow her lawn all summer and hasn't raked her leaves once. I'll spiff up her yard with my brand new Grass Shredder 3000. Oh, everybody will be so impressed.
Sure enough, the next Saturday morning when everybody in the neighborhood was outside working or playing, Dirk revved up the sidewalk in his shiny new mower. Ronald watched from his porch swing as Dirk waved to all the neighbors as he zipped across Mrs. Magruder's front lawn, trimming the grass and shredding the dead leaves.
Don't mind me, just doing something really nice for Mrs. Magruder, 'cause that's how I roll.
When he finished, the neighbors crowded around.
It was like totally the sweetest thing ever.
You're quite the gentleman. We're lucky to have you in the neighborhood, young man.
So thoughtful. Here, take this pumpkin pie I just baked.
Ronald stared in fascination. The whole neighborhood was praising Dirk.
Must be great to have everyone say such nice stuff about you.
A few minutes later, Dirk sauntered up Ronald's walk, flaunting the pumpkin pie.
Haha, score! Totally worked.
Everyone thinks you're wonderful for helping Mrs. Magruder.
Yeah, I got 3 invitations to dinner, and I'll probably get Christmas presents from every neighbor on the block.
After Dirk left, Ronald sat staring at Mrs. Magruder's house. I mean, sure, the yard looked great now, but her gutters were still a mess, and her door was battered.
Maybe if I can clean her gutters and fix her doors, everybody will think I'm great too.
The next crisp, sunny Saturday morning, Ronald waited until all the neighbors were out raking their leaves. He rummaged in his garage.
Now, where's that extension ladder? And I know I've got some leftover red paint from my front door. It's gotta be here somewhere.
The paint was nowhere to be found.
Maybe it's in the attic.
Ronald dug through several dusty old boxes, searching.
Nope. Not this one. Huh. What's this?
He pulled out several framed cross-stitch pictures.
I remember these. Grandma made them.
He went through them one by one. Each of them showed a picture or a verse, carefully embroidered in colorful thread.
I remember this one hung in the kitchen, and this one was in her hallway.
Ronald moved closer to the dormer window so he could see the last one in better light. It was a Bible verse.
When you give to needy people, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Your Father will reward you because He sees what you do secretly.
Carefully, Ronald peered out the high window. Below, he saw his neighbors at work. The people he wanted to see him working on Mrs. Magruder's house. The people he wanted to praise him for being so helpful.
I think maybe I've got it all backward.
Still considering, Ronald finally located the leftover paint.
Now, why did I put it with my old Nintendo games?
And took paint and pictures both downstairs. But he didn't go to work on Mrs. Magruder's house. Not yet. The following week, he finally saw his chance. Mrs. Magruder's car pulled out of her driveway loaded with suitcases.
She must be going to her daughter's house for the weekend.
Early the next morning, before anybody was up, Ronald snuck across the street to Mrs. Magruder's house. He got on his ladder and cleaned the molding leaves out of her gutters.
Ugh, there's a whole forest of baby trees growing in here.
Then he scraped and painted her front door. There, nice and cheerful. When he was done, it was still early. He packed up and returned to his own home. Before a single person saw him, no one praised him for what he had done. No one offered him a triple chocolate cake. Later that afternoon, he met up with Dirk. as they walked their dogs.
Well, well, well. Somebody really spiffed up Mrs. Magruder's house. Wonder who it was.
Guess some things will always be a mystery.
Ronald knew that none of his neighbors or even Mrs. Magruder herself would know he'd ever done the work. But he knew, and God knew. And that was enough.